Okay, you aren't live. Now we are live. There we go.
Great.
And we see some familiar faces already in the waiting room.
Perfect. And do make me host again.
Wonderful.
You got it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, folks, give us a few seconds and we'll just get started.
Okay. I will start letting them in. Yes.
Raj, are you ready?
One more minute.
Okay.
So 30 seconds.
We need this clock already.
Yeah.
That we will have for the day.
Exactly.
Every time, start the timer.
Yeah.
Lindsay, when Kevin Kolchak arrives, you can make him co-host too, and you can instruct him as usual. Great.
Okay.
And Malu, you'll do Kevin's introduction, right?
Yeah.
All right. I will go ahead and let them in.
There we go.
Perfect.
And right now.
All right. Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. This is a special session we are hosting today. We know you're all busy with your hackathons, but this is today's special session to talk to you about what is the purpose of the hackathon and why are you doing this? And of course, is to get started with your quantum journey. So today we want to introduce you to the two people who are at very different phases of their quantum journey, have very interesting things to share. All right. Let's give folks one more minute to join in. But again, welcome, folks. Today, we're going to do a session. We'll have two amazing speakers for you, both working on different parts of their quantum journeys. One is Nicole Williams Ruiz. She's with Compound Venture Capital. Yeah, and we'll do a brief introduction of her quickly. And then we'll have Kevin at the 11:30 mark, who will talk about his journey in the quantum field, but coming from the startup side. All right, so to introduce Nicole, we have Raj here. Raj, please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Womanium. Today we have a special guest. And the guest is special because she started her journey a long time ago with Womanium. And it is a great pleasure to introduce Nicole Williams. Nicole Williams today is an investor at Compound VC, located out of New York City. And she invests in various technologies. When we first met Nicole, when the Womanium team first met Nicole, it was 2017. It was at Google's office in Washington, DC, where there were hundreds of people, and all of them from different walks and different professions, different backgrounds and different skills. And amongst those hundreds of people, one girl stood out, and that was Nicole Williams. She had a special aura, a special excitement, curiosity, ambition, and drive. And pretty soon, she became a Womanium fellow. She was working with Womanium on various topics, starting with artificial intelligence. But also, while being at Womanium, we allowed her to branch out into new areas and new domains, from energy systems, where she worked with some faculty on creating some new power systems and partnerships, to defense systems, where Nicole used to represent Womanium at places like Defense Innovation Board, where she got to see a plethora of different challenges, innovations, and people in leadership positions. We also introduced Nicole to the field of investment, and we had taken Nicole to a couple of investment meetings, and Nicole had the breadth as well as curiosity to engage with those fields individually, independently, and today, here she is. And this image kind of represents the Nicole that I remember and I met, who was a little bird yet to fly, and today it is great to see Nicole soaring in the skies. So Nicole Williams, she joined us when she was 19, and she has a very interesting journey. Unlike some of you, unlike many of you, I know that there are some high school students in the program, but there are a lot of people with masters and PhD. When Nicole joined us, she had just left high school. And from high school, she came to Womanium, and from Womanium, pretty soon, in a matter of about a few few months, about a year and a little bit more. I remember receiving a phone call from somebody from an investment firm, and they asked me about Nicole, and I remember giving a reference to Nicole. So I would definitely enjoy the stories, the journeys, and the trajectories, as well as a great insight that Nicole has accumulated from that very early beginning as a little bird, and all the world that she has seen since then, flying high and soaring far. So Nicole, welcome. It is great to see you and great to have you here.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Thanks for the awesome introduction, Raj. Yeah, excited to share about my journey. It's definitely been probably an atypical one, both for venture and for other industries in general. I'll start a little bit with sort of coming out of high school, how I was thinking about things, my time at Womanium a little bit, and how I got to the job I do today, which is investing in frontier tech at a fund called Compound, as we talked about. And one of my main focuses has been quantum and near-term quantum and what those technologies look like. So when I got out of high school, I was always pretty interested in technology. I'd been exposed a lot to sort of like emerging technologies, and my dad was in the aerospace industry, my mom did IT. But the high school I went to actually did not have a lot of focus on technology or STEM. You couldn't even take a computer science class at the time, which is kind of wild to look back at now. But right away, I was going into college, wanted to study computer science, did this for one semester at a university, found that a lot of people getting computer science jobs in the real world were actually getting these jobs through their portfolios and through real life application work they had, rather than just their degree or the label from a school they got, especially if you're not at maybe a top 10 computer science school. And I found that kind of interesting, especially because university is very, very expensive. And so when I came back to the DC, Virginia area, I would try to go to a lot of technical meetups. That's how I met the Womanium team. I would try and learn as much as I could from people who are actually in the industry and understand how they had gotten their jobs and what that looked like. And so I ended up dropping out of university because it was a lot of money, and I didn't think that it was quite worth, it was quite worth the amount of money that it was. And I also did community college in the meantime. I also did a data science boot camp in the meantime. So tried just about every version of educational processes in the middle there. And so after that, I worked briefly. I interned at a company called Gartner. It was actually a company that got acquired by Gartner called Capterra, doing B2B SaaS marketplace landscape marketing and that type of thing. So got to know the world of SaaS companies pretty intimately. Then worked with the Womanium team on a variety of different projects. It was exciting to see both just all these different emerging industries and how these government players thought about growing these technologies and bringing in smart new talent like you guys sort of to new fields as quickly as possible, and what the minimum viable building blocks of these industries really were. So that was a lot of fun, and met a lot of exciting people through this process, as Raj mentioned, and also got to get my hands into angel investing and sort of like meeting some of the people that Prachi was excited about talking to. And so that was exciting as well. After that, I did a few different things. I applied to a medical tech accelerator that I was accepted into. I was very interested in sort of healthcare and diagnostics, and specifically why machine learning was taking a little bit longer to seep into the world of healthcare and all the regulations that existed around that. And I thought privacy preserving ML could be an answer to speeding up that technology, but also preserving the privacy of patients in the industry. And so learned a lot about that, learned a lot about insurance and starting companies and what that could look like, but really thought maybe this is not for me quite yet. But the field and the way that people were supporting these entrepreneurs was very, very exciting. And so after that, I looked around a little bit more, did that data science bootcamp around that time, and got sort of a foundation in Python, and got a little bit of a portfolio underneath me, which was helpful as well. And after that, I was thinking about going to do some sort of machine learning work. Like I mentioned, very interested in healthcare and the way that this technology was emerging and affecting a lot of people. Ended up doing a number of things, one of which was putting out a lot of white papers that I was reading on Twitter at the time. I'm sure many of you guys have seen this community, but there's a very exciting community of academics on Twitter who sort of share their research and are very, very open to answering any questions from anybody else. And so that was really exciting as somebody who felt that could be hard to find technologists who are willing to chat about their work, found that people on Twitter were just ready to do that almost anytime. And so made a lot of friends doing that, and also made a lot of industry contacts through doing that. And so was interested in going to machine learning, tweeted about looking for a job actually, and was considering going to work at a variety of different ML labs. But actually at that moment had a partner at the firm that I now work at reach out to me and say, have you ever considered going into VC? It seems like the research you do, your interest in early stage technology, your interest in this like landscape would be a good fit. And I was like, honestly, I haven't really thought about that at all, but happy to talk. So we had an informational call. They had just closed up the process for hiring investors and ended up going well. They said, we'll open up the process for you. You should just apply. So applied, went through this 2-month application process of sort of doing diligence on a variety of companies, meeting with portfolio founders, meeting with the whole rest of the investment team, and then ended up joining venture capital about 2.5 years ago now. So I've got my feet wet in the industry, and I was really excited about joining Compound specifically because there's a lot of early stage firms that maybe are not as heavy on the diligence process or not heavy on the sort of like technical knowledge that's necessary, but we believe that especially in emerging tech fields, that's very, very important, especially in a world where there's a lot of hype around early stage companies. There's a lot of hype around getting into big rounds of companies that have star-studded teams and things like that. And so we have a unusually thesis-driven process, which means we take a lot of time to meet academics in the field. We take a lot of time to meet researchers in the field and develop a view on our own about what sort of key inflection points are in a given area of technology. And we try to do that before we meet companies, and then we sort of wrap those people into our diligence process as well often. And then we support these founders very one-on-one, often even making hires for them. And so in areas like quantum and robotics and things like that, the talent can be very constrained because the speed at which you can pull these people into the industry and sort of get the necessary knowledge is small. And so we'll also often help portfolio companies hire and do things like that. So that's sort of the high level of my career. And I'm sure Prachi and Raj have mentioned that you guys will have some questions, so I'll leave some time for that as well. But yeah, that's the high level arc.
Fantastic. So tell us, you spent about 2.5 years, you mentioned, working in the venture capital field. Are you happy with the decision now? And how has it helped you? I always remember as someone who's really curious and who can very quickly write, document, and synthesize information. And, this comes back to your work with due diligence, understanding companies well. So yeah, how has it fed into some of your skills and also your curiosities?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you're somebody who likes to follow a lot of industries at once, it's definitely a good job for that. And I really enjoyed the job, would highly recommend it if you can find the right firm. Venture capital is like a high variance job in terms of the quality of your experience, I would say. But if you can find the right partners and people you really want to learn from, it's incredible. And almost like an industry where you get an apprenticeship, which exists in few places these days. But yeah, throughout the diligence process, which is, consuming white papers and technical documents and financial models for like 3 days on end and trying to regurgitate and understand what you're missing and who you can go to quickly to understand those things is very important. Also, as we support portfolio companies, there's often very specific, very random technical needs of theirs. And so when we have a call with a founder, understanding, okay, you now need this CTO hire in the next 24 hours, how can we find you a list of people who'd be best for this hire? How can we make sure you're set up to be the best place possible to hire this person so that they really want to join you as well? And things like that are definitely some of the things I enjoy the most about the position.
Fantastic. And looking back, do you feel like this is the position for you? How do you compare being a startup founder, because you meet a lot of them, to being in the venture capital industry?
Yeah. Oh man, comparing them is definitely hard. Being a founder is just, it's an incredibly intense job. You're the person at the end of the day who is in charge of just about everything. And so I would say they're both positions with a lot of responsibility, but as a founder, you're the one sort of holding all of those things in tension, holding all these big questions about your business. And so I have immense respect for founders. A lot of my good friends are also founders, and I see them, working day and night for years on these problems. I would say venture, they're just different positions, but they're both intense, and I admire founders a lot.
Another question we have is, we have a lot of PhD students in our programs, a lot of postdoctoral students as well. And for a lot of them, in fact, when we urged them, we made this program, Womanium Quantum Computing and Entrepreneurship program. But a lot of them are very hesitant to jump into the industry or jump into entrepreneurship. So tell us about your viewpoint as well, because a lot of people here, if they're studying physics or optics, they think, quantum is a big field. They're afraid of it. and they don't want to get into it. They think, oh, I just don't know enough. Maybe I need another PhD for this. And here you are, you jumped into the deep waters and you've started in this field. So tell us a bit of that journey as well. And what would your recommendation be to people who want to take that first step?
Yeah, definitely. I would say if you're a PhD or somebody with a very academic background, we actually just hired also a PhD to our investment team, and end up like a lot of the people who advise us or are part-time researchers for us as well come from that background. The thing we see most often, I would say, intention, and again, founders who are pitching us are very often PhDs. So I feel like I'm surrounded by PhDs all the time. The thing we see most often is founders who pitch us are typically this balance between somebody who has immense and an incredible academic background and a technical understanding of a very specific area, and this balance of understanding of how to commercialize and productize a new technology. And so on the one hand, you can have this very deep understanding, but getting some sort of like exposure, whether it's through reading or through Womanium or through jobs in the industry where you can understand how to really break down a new technology to an audience that is willing to pay for it now, is super, super key. And quantum, this space is quite interesting because some of the most interesting teams that I think have started companies in the past few years, you can see the founders have this experience, right? They have a very discrete plan for how in the first 2 years, they're going to work on de-risking this one specific algorithm they think is very interesting for like financial modeling, for example, financial modeling and like drug discovery, some of the two biggest go-to-market applications in quantum. And so trying to understand that market very nichely and trying to move then from there are things that often you don't need more technical knowledge for. You just need to be able to talk to people who are maybe on the purchasing side in the financial industry, or even just read about how a variety of companies are approaching it in this space, or have an internship experience or something like that to sort of understand. So yeah, the PhD thing is definitely, it can be a great asset to you. I also think, from my background, I don't have a PhD. And so sort of understanding if you feel like there's a technical hurdle to you accessing something you want to access, trying to understand how you could sort of verify that to people without the PhD, like what is the thing that they want you to do in your job at the end of the day? Like what's the skill you want to have, whether it's being able to read those white papers, being able to understand certain technical aspects, trying to really understand like whether it's PhD or if there are other things that can help get you there if you're trying to make that decision, I think is important.
When you see people of your own age or others who've been through the high school with you and now what they're doing today, would you say, I'd love to go back and actually get that PhD, get that master's degree, or is this a trajectory for you?
Yeah. Oh man, it's a hard, like the would you questions are always very hard. I think every now and then I consider going back and diving a bit deeper into biology specifically, actually. I think biology and sort of computational fundamentals right now are just, they're going to be the focus of the next decade. There's so much interesting stuff happening here in quantum as well, actually. But yeah, every now and then I consider going back to study some aspect of biology, but for now, I think I'm really enjoying the path that I'm on. So we'll see.
Yeah. So we have a question from, another question one of our audience members have asked, not audience members, our participants have asked, Juliana, is do you suggest some readings for absolute beginners who want to get insight into how the venture capital industry works?
Oh, yeah. Oh, man. Let's see. I guess it depends what you're curious about. There's so many readings, and feel free to hit me up on Twitter. On my handle is nwilliams030, or a variety of other places, and I can give you personalized recommendations. Let's see. I have a few things I've written, but it really depends if you're curious about the sort of like how VCs think about things, if you're curious about like how startups get funded and what they think about, what you should think about as a potential founder. Like those are all very different questions, like from the internal perspective versus how the incentives affect technologists and people developing technology. So I definitely do have recommendations, but I want to give you a precise one. So feel free to reach out to me.
Raj, I see you're ready for a question. Would you like to go next? Yeah.
Yes, Nicole, where do you think the quantum industry is going into the future? Because a lot of people are getting trained in the quantum computing domain. So what are the key things that they should keep in mind as they go forward?
Yeah, good question. Let's see, specifically from the perspective of somebody who's being trained. I think having my biggest recommendation from like a career perspective would be that having experience at a technology company sort of understanding how technology is productized in general, again, whether it's on the software side or on the hardware side, I think can be very, very helpful to making your own predictions about how quantum is going to develop. Because right now we've seen sort of this shift in startups going from pure hardware plays to trying much harder to advertise basically their near-term applications, because we've seen the biggest quantum companies as they go public kind of struggle in these public markets, as people don't really understand whether the applications they're pursuing are really, really excellent yet and excellent across the board. I think many people would say the answer is no, probably. And so trying to focus on both these commercialization pathways and understand there, as well as like algorithms development. We've seen time and time again, a lot of great quantum professors have said, look, it looks like we have this great algorithm for this problem, and this actually is a problem where quantum does better. And then they assign a grad student or two, and the grad student says, actually, I found a classical algorithm that works more effectively. So algorithms development in general, obviously huge, but also getting sort of that product experience on top of that, I think is big.
The next question is that a lot of participants are within your age range. And when you came and joined Womanium, you were still a teenager, and you're still not that far because not much time has passed, only a few years have passed. So what is the thing that young people at this juncture, at this critical point in technological development should keep in mind as they develop their careers, as they pursue their education, as they build their future prospects? What industry knowledge they should keep in mind?
Yeah, let's see. I would say in technology specifically, the biggest thing that I think I've learned is that people are so open for the most part to you not having the stereotypical experience. And there'll always be a lot of people who say, you need to have this one career credential. You need to do this path. You have to do this thing. That's how I did it. And nobody would give me the job until I did it. So you have to do the same thing. You have to suffer in the same way. I would say spending time, if you want a job, or if you want to work in a certain industry, or if you want to do a certain thing, spending time understanding that organization, what their goals are, how other people got there, even what their problems are. You can learn a lot from reaching out to people on LinkedIn and saying, hey, you worked on this team before. What were you working on? You know, what did you think about the company and all those things? And really just saying, like, coming to the people there, writing them a thoughtful cold email saying you've read their research, you've read blog posts they put out, that type of thing, and saying, you know, I think it's likely you guys might be experiencing these problems in the near future. I have some opinions on how you could approach that. Here's a portfolio, some portfolio work that might even back up my ability to do that. Would you consider having a phone call with me? And I think reaching out to people like that is 10 times higher signal than applying through a resume or having, I don't know, applying through any sort of portal or anything like that, because you've really thought about the problem. And yeah, technology is very exciting for those reasons. So I would say, if you really want to do something, you can almost always find the way to get in contact with those people quite quickly and get your foot in the door. And so never underestimate your ability to do those things.
Yeah. This is really excellent advice. Just for our participants, just keep this in mind. This is really excellent advice. We have a career fair on August 26th. And again, you're not going there to talk about yourself and your degree. You're really going there to talk to a company, understand what their problems are, and help them get to the end point. Their only concern is like, how do I have my next product out? How do I do my next raise? Or how do I accomplish X? And your pitch is, I'm going to help you get to X and much faster than any other person.
Definitely. I guess if I would even add one other thing there, it's like, you should also be assessing what jobs can give you. Don't feel like because maybe you don't have a lot of professional experience on paper that, you know, you're just asking for a job and you'll take anything they'll get and anything like that. You should understand how, you know, as a smart and promising young individual, any given job will be a step to the next thing you want to do. And so part of the reason why a lot of good jobs are perceived as good jobs is because they're a good step to something else. You learn how to manage financial models, or you learn how to do some sort of like versatile job experience. And so, yeah, as you're going to career fairs, I would say definitely consider those things, and it'll make you more thoughtful about your own industry. If you're talking to a lot of quantum companies, say, okay, you're thinking about this commercialization pathway I've read. How do you compare to these 3 other players in the industry? What technically are you doing different? how do you see the risk that they are facing versus the risk that you're facing? And feel free to assess those things. I think it makes a better conversation for everybody involved.
A lot of our participants are international. We have participants from about 88 countries. And oftentimes they ask about how they can pursue a future, a career, especially in the quantum domain, but also generally in the technical domain. And a lot of them also have questions about entrepreneurship, because some of the countries do not have as mature an entrepreneurial domain and industry like the United States, and even as mature an investment community like the US has. So what would advice or guidance would you give to some of these people? They might still be smart, they might have great ideas, but how exactly to proceed?
Yeah, I would say finding a community of people who are thinking about similar problems to you is really, really helpful. Even in Virginia has some great technology schools. Virginia, I mean, defense in general is kind of the foundation of a lot of amazing American technology. However, DC is not the same tech environment as Silicon Valley or even Austin or New York now. And so if you're thinking about founding a company, if you're thinking about sort of like working on a very cutting edge technology, you want to find other people who are thinking about those things in the same way. For me, it was not going through school. I think 93% of people in DC have a degree. And so that was a very unusual background compared to SF or New York. But there are programs, one is called Emergent Ventures that you can apply to for a grant, and you'll get partnered. It's run by Tyler Cowen, who's a pretty well-known economist, and you'll get given a small grant to think through ideas, but also meet other technologists and young innovators. There's one specifically for India. Generally, they give out grants globally, but finding communities like that, I find very, very helpful, because you end up getting matched with a lot of other young and maybe even very particularly high agency people are thinking through, you know, if I want to start a company in this country, how do I incorporate that? If I want to patent this technology, how do I do that? Questions that it might be harder to find in your average cohort. And sometimes it's online communities. For me, I think that's what Twitter was in some ways, being able to talk to these academics from all over the world. But I would say finding people who understands your problems can help you sort of like work through the really challenging things that even seem impossible sometimes.
Excellent. And also, unlike many other participants and almost all other speakers, you are in a unique position in that you had been inside Womanium. You had been part of the Womanium team. And looking forward, what are some of the areas and what are some of the programs and projects from Womanium side that we should focus on? And I think that as a person who has been both inside, through, and now outside in the industry, you might have some unique perspectives.
Yeah, let's see. I don't know if I know all the programs you guys have run recently, but one that I'm very interested in is just bioinformatics, biotechnology, software for sort of like the DNA sequencing world generally. We've seen that as DNA sequencing has sort of taken off, it's just created this like very exponential creation of data that the bio world really doesn't know how to handle. If you look at software in these industries, for the most part, like if you're working in an academic lab, even things like containerization that in the rest of the software world is very basic, is sometimes not accessible to the average bioinformatician. And so I think we're just going to see some like really, really crazy takeoffs in the next few years. We've seen Alpha, all the different protein folding companies. And I think last week they announced basically this exponential creation of their protein folding database and all the different proteins that they've now modeled. And so things like that we're going to continue to see in the next decade, and understanding the fundamentals of software that will underpin that, and understanding the sequencing that will affect these different areas of biology, I think is very interesting.
That is a really interesting feedback. And I think that based on that point that you raised, I would definitely invite you to come back and speak at our next program, which is going to be on the biology of aging that we are doing with some of the heads of Johns Hopkins, National Institutes of Health, National Institutes of Aging, and many of the European universities. So that intersection that you brought between biology and computation is of very interest to even to that program too. So I think that you can add some new perspectives there. Now, beyond that, what does an investor do, especially an early stage investor do? Because not many people know what investors exactly do on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis. So what is it that you bring to a company beyond just an infusion of capital and money?
Yeah. So I'll talk about my day-to-day, and then I'll really quickly talk about what we think we bring to the table. There's this maybe joke about when investors proclaiming that they are value add investors, and most people saying, at the end of the day, you really bring money to the table. Let's not joke here. And so I'll talk a little bit about that. So day to day, I would say my job is 30% sort of thesis creation, which is research into a given area, following what companies, academic labs, et cetera, have put out in any of the industries we look at. For us specifically, those are AI and ML, robotics and automation, digital health, biotechnology, synthetic biotherapeutics, and then next-gen computing and decentralized finance. And so following research in this space is very core. That also means reaching out to academics, reaching out to people that I think are particularly excellent and thoughtful at the intersection of research and commercialization, and then just talking to a lot of founders in this space, even before they've incorporated companies and as they're thinking about how to spin IP out of a university, for example. Then from there, diligence and taking pitch meetings is like a big part of that. To take a ton of pitch meetings per week. And that just means hearing about the foundations of a business. And these are normally companies that don't even have product market fit yet. So they're telling us about their research. They're telling us about this product they want to build and the section of customers they're going to sell it to. And they and I are sort of like going back and forth about why those customers will want to buy the thing and why they can get the technology to the place that it needs to be in the amount of time with the amount of capital we will give them. And then the last 30%, 30 to 40% is just portfolio support in general. So for the next 2 years of a company, after we've invested, we are the main people working with them. We lead rounds, which means we write the biggest check into a company, and then we bring other strategic investors in. And then our job is to make sure that company keeps getting money until they're at a series B or C, which is normally around 30 to 60 million or more dollars at that point. And then we'll hand it off to investors who know that stage of companies better. But that's supporting them in everything from hiring, often hiring very specific technical talent, as I mentioned, to thinking about how they're prioritizing their commercialization roadmap. Very small stuff, just like going to visit their labs and understanding how they're prioritizing different technical parts, what challenges they're having, just sort of visiting the team in person to understand like how this team culture is forming as they're going to scale up to maybe 100 employees in 3 or 4 years. It's a crazy thing to have to manage as a CEO or as a co-founding team. And talking through all those problems. Often our job is just to connect them to the right people at the right time. So they need to talk to the head of a commercialization at a certain company. How do we find that person as quickly as possible and make sure those two people understand context and match them up with each other? The other biggest thing that I think people understate, and this really is the main part of our job, is just understanding, compared to every other company in your space, compared to every company that could branch into your space and the competitors, why are you best positioned to continue raising money? How do we make sure you are continually best positioned to raise money? How do we go to all the investors who follow on and say, this is why you should invest in this technology? How do we understand what those investors need? Every fund has different check sizes, different fund sizes, different amounts they'll commit. And so doing that math is a very important thing actually to understand and make sure your company is continually capitalized. So finding investors early on who are able to do that sort of like math and calculation and really like 4D chess about other people and what they'll bring to the table. Maybe at the Series A, for example, that one after we'll invest in, we'll realize that this person needs connections to a bunch of pharma people because suddenly they are very interested in pharma partnership. So who is the best VC who will write the best check size, but also has a history of really connecting founders with the correct pharma people. So all of those things are things we think about, and there's a lot of things outside of that, but that's a little bit about what the day-to-day looks like.
Excellent. I think that gives at least a little bit of a peek for many people into what investors actually do. So Nicole, this was great. It is good to see you doing wonderful things. And as I started with the picture of a little bird in a nest, it is great to see you flying and soaring in the sky and helping other birds spread their wings and fly with their companies, with their ideas, and with their startups. And I think that at some point you should come back and talk more about the entrepreneurship side of things, because a lot of our participants who have got deep backgrounds in science, technology, etc., they would definitely love the type of insights and advice, and also the experience and lesson that you have accumulated in such a short span of time. So
awesome.
It is good to see you.
Thank you guys for having me. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Good to see you. And thanks for inspiring others. Yeah.
Oh, thank you guys. See ya.
Bye, Nicole.
Bye.
Then a warm welcome to our next speaker. Our next speaker is such a quantum founder, a founder of a quantum startup in the early stages. Kevin Kolchak, welcome. You have a background in chemistry. You have been a researcher in chemistry for several years, and now you started your company, ChemicalQDevice, focused on improving neuroscience data analytics, making it faster in hospitals, even in urgent care units, real life. Usually you are on the other side of the conversation because you also host the so-called quantum discussions, where you successfully invited over 50 industry leaders in the quantum computing field in your weekly sessions, offering a platform for presentations, offering a platform for discussions and brainstorms. And we look forward to hearing today how you build such a quantum community, exponentially grow your network, and how that brings value to your startup as well. Welcome, Kevin. Looking forward to your talk. And let's first briefly check the audio if everything is all right.
Loud and clear?
Lindsay, can you do the speaker test with Kevin?
Yep. Can you just say a few words?
Kevin Kawchak.
Sounds good.
Wonderful.
Will you have any slides today?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
And first off, I just wanted to thank the previous speaker. Now, for those of you looking for investment, when she said, we support these founders, that's not a common phrase. A lot of them are just like, they'll get in and they just want exactly what they want, right? The other thing, so it got brought up as far as how do you go forward in getting jobs, these types of things, is to do your own research, right? They're not going to come to you. You have to go to them. And it's just like applying for a job just down the street. Like you have to know about quantum, basically. And then the other things from this is, don't be afraid to take responsibility. With a lot of these things, when I went from bachelor's to master's, I didn't really want to do a job. I just wanted to do more schooling. And at some point after your fourth postdoc, it's time to, branch out maybe a little bit. And somebody asked the question, what is the path, right, to investor? And I would say a lot of investors were founders. It's so much learning and experience. And I would say that's a huge part in investing in anything, is that you have to understand the industry. Now, today I'm going to talk, and I'm going to share this here. So, see the slides? Good to go? And then,
Yeah, we don't see the full screen yet, Kevin.
okay, yeah. So
this is better. We still see the, yes, this is perfect. And
awesome.
thank you for sharing the advice already. It is a good combination of both talks. We look forward to building a quantum network.
So obviously the big concern is, how do you build a quantum network? Now, many things in business, startups, and even technology is that you can't go directly at people without having anything. So that's the big thing, is building up your brand, doing your research, hosting, giving speeches, and the like. Now today, let's see here, there's many things. Okay, so the central points for today's talk is that your colleagues, for the most part, are concerned about building their own networks, right? So when you have a big post or anything, and I've gone through this as far as the whole world's gonna, flock to my page because of one big post, it doesn't really work that way. It's more like they see something flash across their screen, and then they'll be like, oh, okay, that's something I'm interested in, right? Now, some of the things as far as NSF's prediction of a practical quantum computer for next year, and you also have the White House's May 4th announcement this year. These are huge announcements that you have to be aware of because they affect the industry as a whole. And even Xanadu's June 1st announcement this year is they announced a specific task in quantum was developed in 36 microseconds that would take 9,000 years. So do the news, get Google alerts, quantum computing, quantum algorithms, those types of things. So it's not all about you. So everybody has kind of a hard learning experience with this, but it's important to feature and recommend others to gain credibility. Not only, you don't always receive recommendations back, so it's not one-to-one, it might only be 10%, but it's important to keep in mind that the universe is not just yourself. And in that, you have to be caring, sharing, and daring. So what do these things mean? So they use these in the startup world all the time. So caring is obviously, LinkedIn is not a a negative platform. It's positive, right? I don't think I've hardly seen anything negative. It's not like Facebook and all these other ones. These are professionals you're dealing with. So you're not there to blast. Okay, the second thing is sharing. Now, as entrepreneurs, founders, co-founders, is after you create something that's kind of awesome, you want to think that it has all this IP value and it's going to get you into a company. Think of it like this, is people want to form a consensus of you and for you to have a fantastic portfolio, okay? So it's never just like one post, one anything. Now, the other thing is daring, right? So say the news breaks and you're able to make a correlation in your head that will, help your other, colleagues in this quantum network on LinkedIn understand, make the correlation. And the big thing is back up what you're saying. So create references, these types of things. And the other thing is know when to be brief. So there's times when you have lots to say and you're using the maximum number of characters in LinkedIn, but a lot of times people don't want to read all that. It's just the truth. So, okay. So I'm going to go through a sequence of really good portfolio or really good kind of profile pages. And I'll tell you why I like them. So you'll save a lot of time, and I'm talking like weeks or months, if you just research other people in quantum. You could look at basically ChemicalQDevice, all the speakers I'll show you at the end, and just research, okay? So the biggest things in these two with Araceli and Salvador, they've both been speakers on my panel, is that their cover photos reflect technology and or scale. So you see on the left, I really like Araceli's. It says building a quantum ready workforce. Boom. It's simple. It doesn't have too much text. It's an attractive, like the color scheme, it's modern. And with Salvador's, you see it's kind of got scale to it. This is probably Mexico City, and you see the sun kind of glaring in. So never, ever, ever leave your cover photo blank. It just doesn't look good. So indoor profile pictures that feature solid colors in the background tend to be the best. And I have a little bit of experience. I had a red ribbon event and I posted a photo that was just like, it was at the event. It was kind of dark. It showed like, that I was involved with many other people. But when I went to invite people for events, it just didn't work. And you have to be aware that your profile picture is potentially the number one thing. So you want it professional. So by me saying that, I think you know what I mean, like filtering out everything else. And like Salvador's and Araceli's, both solid backgrounds. Now, the second title is somewhat more important than your name, unless you're like MD, PhD, blah, 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 and people see that. But for the majority of us, you'll see between the two, you get the contrast. So you can go, quantum engineer, scientist, professor, senior consultant. I always like to put a little at the end of it. I think Marlu's has that. So it's, lowercase a, lowercase t, and then his would be at whatever. It's just a nice little touch, just because people don't see your profile. A lot of times they see whatever is scrolling through. So you don't always get that full you don't get the full picture. And people see your profile picture, your name, and then that second line, as I call it, and then Araceli's Quantum Technologies. Now, in both of these, it's important to notice that they have highlights. So you see with Araceli's, it has a big E, that purple E, and then highlights for Salvador, and they're both related to technology or quantum. So if you get the gist of this, is basically do your research, focus on material more than trying to make something flashy. And I'm going to use Marlu's profile for this next part. So It's very well done. It's a positive profile picture. That's the other thing. Unless you're a super duper investor and you can do whatever you want. For the most of us, a nice little smile is good. So the about section, hers is detailed. In this specific section where it says about, it allows you many characters, and if it's all good, go ahead and do the max, because it's not like filling up the profile. But when somebody clicks on it and it's like all paragraphed off and it looks good, then go ahead, So the other thing is in activity on the right here, she does congratulations for one of her colleagues. That's a good thing to do, right? So like, again, I don't see Bill Gates like posting too many things about other people, but then again, he has 35 million followers, the most out of anybody. So, and the other thing is Marlu talks about future quantum technology events, and then also details progression with her current employer, all of which are good. So if you don't get that sense, it's about learning, right? There's actually a Warren Buffett quote that it's you need to be a lifelong learner. Now, for education, so Marlu is mostly in education, and then other people are more into work. Like it's just like, both are work, but like, you know what I mean. And when somebody's scrolling through your profile and you really want them to focus on it, when you do education or work experience, you can add skills, okay? And you can add videos and you can add links, and those things add volume to that section. So say, for instance, if you go to somebody's profile on the phone and you see they're active in this company for 3 years, and then right underneath that, like you have 2 other things, you really want to add the skills and those types of videos and that kind of stuff for that section, because when people are looking at evaluating your profile, is that you want their eyes to stop. They're not going to look at anything. It's just, it's more like about things being properly formatted. Now, in volunteering, I wouldn't go too wild with volunteering, especially if it's not directly related. But in this case, it's Womanium, STEM. It's really good. But I would say as a whole, and I've been told this, just keep volunteering kind of at a minimum, especially if you're a founder, these types of things. Because mine is Habitat for Humanity. I've been doing it for like 13 years, but it's very minimal in my profile because it's more social services, but it shows that you're active in the community, and more power to you, right? Just don't like emphasize it. Now on publications, you see on this profile is you see, the title, you see who it's with. I also put the Nature ACS scientific, but if it's something you want people to see, keep in mind, there's all these like extra little boxes you can add in LinkedIn. And then also Marlu, detailed her recent grant, which was good as well. Now I'm going to focus on John Barnes. Now John Barnes was a special speaker on the discussion as well, and he's established. He's like 2014, and by the way, Salvador's like 2004. So when you learn all these things, you want to associate with people that have been around quantum for a while. So if you look at John's profile, starting with the cover photo, very attractive. It looks recent. And then also you see highlights. John is attending one quantum. And then you see mutual groups, quantum. So don't be afraid to add groups or add to groups too, because those things, as you see, are showing up in his main profile. Now, under skills, you see recruiting. So John adds these things. He adds recruiting, technical, and quantum mechanics. And then his colleagues come around and endorse him. So it's good to see that he has high endorsements for these things: recruiting, technical, recruiting, and quantum mechanics. So the other thing, and that we're on the right side here, is recommendations, is that Mr. Barnes has also been recommended by PhD student, co-founder, developer. Now, if you're evaluating somebody else's profile, which you can do too, it's not just about them checking you out, is you really want to figure out what other people are doing in this industry as well. So these are 10 principles. And basically the first one, be specific to help colleagues evaluate your background. So this means when they look at it, what's going to catch their eye, right? If you have all this other experience from high school and college that's not that you don't want to emphasize. Build up the section with videos and skills that you want them to fix their eyes on. Number two, work hard writing posts instead of hiring companies. This is a big thing. Even last night I was on a panel, and people think I just need to hire. The whole thing with being a founder, and you find this maybe 6 months in or 9 months in, is you have to do the work. And if you don't, then you're just going to be relying on people and wasting money. Because if you don't have the material, i.e. writing your own posts, then it doesn't make sense to hire all these people. Number three, feature others well in posts and recommendation. We kind of went over that. Number four, what will your content look on phones versus PCs? When you do a post versus the phone versus a PC, it looks different. So check on the phone and then see how the text got formatted. Sometimes there's an extra hash or extra like an overhanging name or like, like a sentence that kind of like doesn't look good on mobile, and you can fix it. So add projects. So projects is huge. So if you're listening today and you don't have much experience, you don't have much education, there's a feature called projects. Projects allows you to tag anybody that you're connected with, and you can boost that section up. And if it's one of the only things you have on your profile, it's a lot better than not having awesome experience and not having awesome education in quantum. Now, number six is big. So I audit. So auditing is basically you take these courses for free, but you don't get a certificate. And Stanford, Harvard, UC, San Diego, a bunch of organizations allow you to audit their courses. And then you can include that in whatever section you want, and then just include audit. Number seven, remove hard-earned, irrelevant information. So this is hard. This is a bitter pill for all of us. So you've worked really hard on your, thesis, dissertation, these types of things. And keep in mind, these things do have value, but maybe emphasize other things. And especially the things that like, I see things on LinkedIn profiles that it's just like, well, it's there that they did it, but maybe better to focus on this new emerging technology. Now, when you hashtag things, number 8 is it shows up in many different places. If you send that link of that post to other people, it'll show hashtag. I think it's actually part of the link. And then you can also tag people that you aren't connected with. Now, keep it relevant and keep it, concise. I wouldn't tag like 100 people just for this one post. But keep in mind, you may be moving up, and it's good to keep these people in mind. And maybe the first time they see you is now better than later. Number 9, talk about your area very frequently in local events. I'll touch on this more. And then also, it's like psychology, something like that. But basically, you're always seeking not only to learn, continue learning, but you want to get to the point where you're teaching, and not only teaching, but mentoring people as well. Okay, so these are some of the bigger posts that I've had. So my biggest post has been Michelle's. She got a new job at Riverlane at US Operations, and people love this post. I woke up in the morning and I saw the news and I said, this would be a good post. And, so you feature all these people that I would say job promotions is probably the number one thing you could do to promote other people. And by the way, your post is going to be good without getting too much into detail. Now, the other thing is to focus people. If you're researching somebody like John Martinis, he's been doing quantum since 1983. His first paper was the year I was born. It's good to find out their background. And while you're at it, just post. And then the other thing is Quantum Latino. So these are just international events. It makes, not only are you learning, but it just makes your overall, presentation better. Now, the other things, there's been a fair amount of talk. Was there a question?
Yeah, questions are coming in and we're getting short of time. So wonderful to wrap up, and then we have more time for the questions.
Yeah, so the other thing is that for those looking to get into investors, associate with investors, sign up to their newsletters, right, to build your network, and do stuff that they're into. They're not going to come to you, they're already good. And then host your own events. And these are like local things as far as, conducting different events. And do things locally. So these were taken at a startup event. The middle one's called March Mingle, which is the biggest tech and networking event in San Diego. And then also with universities too, they're established. They have good reputation. Now, the conclusions are same as the key points. Your colleagues are concerned about their networks. Now, feature and recommend others to gain credibility. And don't be hesitant, especially be caring on LinkedIn, to also be sharing and daring. And then also know to be brief as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And you highlighted in your talk a very important point: leverage LinkedIn, something that was echoed by Denise Ruffner, Ariselli, that you showed, and that was also present in our previous sessions. And you showed very good examples of how to implement it. Can you, David Quantum from US noticed building a quantum network also has different interpretations. This is true, David. This was with a wink, because networking in the quantum world is very important, also for quantum networks and all other applications to get everything going. And can you tell more about that, Kevin? How has, by organizing those so-called quantum meetups, which are well attended with great speakers, and by being very visible on LinkedIn, how has that helped your company?
Yeah, so first, it's always been medical. So I have a provisional patent back from August 21 that I started writing it. And I knew that I had to learn about quantum. That was the biggest thing. I was like, how am I going to learn about quantum? I'll have discussions. So I had 3 discussions locally, and then I did some virtually, and then it kind of got lonely because one episode, it was just me. So then Ryan Considine just got off from Q2B 21, which is the biggest quantum event in the world. And I asked him to be a speaker. And then ever since then, I haven't skipped an event. That's the main thing, is I really, medical is fine on its own, or neurosciences, where I'm at, because it's growing at a constant rate. But if you have a 6% compound annual growth rate compared to quantum, which is more like 30% for computing, then you can start to insert that. But yeah, that was the driving force, is to learn more about quantum to implement into neuroscience.
Wonderful, because you have that chemistry background, you had the idea to combine the neuroscience data analytics, speed it up. You had a background in one of the fields, and then complementing the quantum skills through your network.
Yeah, and for those of you in academia, don't throw your stuff away. So I just did like 16 experiments for neuroscience, incorporating all these quantum technologies. I sent it to leading university and funding agencies, and I incorporated things that I did in industry as an analytical chemist. It's called, purpose plan experimental details. So I did that for 13 of them, and then it made me think. But basically, that's the thing, is everybody's like, don't throw away your background, as far as like, you learn so much in school, and it's some people stay in school forever, but you start to implement that into kind of your next career path.
What is the main thing you take from your chemical background, would you say now, and the things that you learn through your network?
Like reflecting, I take away, you learn from your mistakes. But the biggest, like I said, the biggest post I did a top quantum experts in 2022. That was a big post. But the main thing is that, like, if I were to, your intuition is doing anything in life is to succeed yourself, but you really have to like step back and then recommend other people, post on other people. Not only are they big posts, but it's also showing that don't put anything about yourself in those. And then, it's not like, people will respect you more. And I think you'll get to where you want to be faster.
David has a question about these LinkedIn postings. How do you increase the number of comments and the number of impressions? How to effectively do that?
Yeah, well, there's certain times of the week. So for instance, I'll do stuff Saturday morning, which isn't the best time to post. Now, the thing that's the thing about LinkedIn, it's all about new content, right? So if you go to reshare, repost without updating anything, a good way to get more posts on a current article is to add more material as it develops. You only get like 2 or 3 days, for the post maturation.
Yeah. Great. And you have a very good and lively meetup yourself. Do you have advice for others? What are good meetups to join?
Oh, there's Washington, D.C. So they do joint kind of Toronto. It's Helen Ma. Helen Ma, and then Deba, or I think that's his first name. And they get people from all over the world. They're on Eventbrite, they're on Meetup. I don't know if they do LinkedIn. So my stuff is more moved to LinkedIn, and I do a Meetup. Now the other one is Chicago. I think there's one at noon today. There's a Chicago quantum computing meetup, and that's Anna Naden. Now Anna will actually be a speaker on SoCal Quantum on Thursday, and then so she's a physicist educator. And there's other ones like pop up, like IBM is incorporating quantum security into their mainframes. But I would say kind of like R3, like the consistent ones. Also overseas, kind of UK. John Barnes, who I featured today, he does entangled discussions, is what he does. So,
and you started these so-called quantum discussions very early. How do you think this positioned you as the organizer of these discussions compared to when you would just be a participant in various meetups?
Well, this is the daring section, right? So many times I had to scramble for speakers. I'm talking like a couple days before. Sometimes you'll get cancellations, but if it's really a priority, you have to make ends meet. So say for instance, I always wanted to have like a new speaker every time. And then actually it's sometimes good. It's like being the Jay Leno of quantum computing. So I had to have an investor on twice. And it was actually really good because I got to see the progress that Russ Fine has made. And he's another investor.
He was also in our session in the VC panel recently. Wonderful.
Yeah, so there's just like, you don't see the behind the scenes of like, the hardest part is inviting speakers. And in specific, when I changed my profile picture, that was an issue because I had to revert back and then I changed the background to white. But it's very particular of how you look, and especially your second line, if you're founder, CEO, wherever, is that something they're interested in, or like, will they respect you based on what they see? They don't look at most people don't see your profiles most of the time. They just see like text and they see you in posts, and they'll only go unless like they have a really big reason to.
So be active and creative well.
Yeah.
Before we finalize the session, what is your final advice for all our participants, our whole group in various stages of quantum, from high school all the way up to postdoc or beyond, including professors, industry professionals? What is your main advice for this younger group, high school, undergraduates, graduates?
Yeah, never stop working hard. A lot of people, including myself, when I got my master's and I have a couple years grad experience after that, you tend to think like you are who you were. And that's very common in a lot of these places. Even when you talk to people, they said, well, I did this and I did this and I did this. So you really have to transition from all that, like the prestige and all, especially like for founders. And it's more like a construction worker than it is like a highly regarded position. Even though people might recognize you as that, the work that you do is late nights, early mornings.
Okay, very good advice. Go for it. Thank you very much, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you for having me on.
Your sessions are Thursday evenings, 6 p.m. PT. All participants are invited to join your so-called quantum discussions with amazing speakers coming up. We thank you very much, Kevin, and then we will look briefly forward to the upcoming days.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks to Womanium. It's also great to see Womanium grow. So I remember, Marlu, you came on and it was just like, after that, it's just like, yes, quantum is happening. Yes, quantum is real. And then, with Womanium Quantum, I think it's fair to say that quantum's here to stay.
Yeah, it has been a tremendous blast the past month. Thank you very much, Kevin, and we will see each other soon again.
Yeah, thank you.
Friday, everyone, be back. We will have a very interesting quantum entrepreneurs panel with the CEO and founder of IQM, Zapata, Mabel Quantum, various quantum companies. Classique we will have there. Everyone there present for you to discuss, to brainstorm, to have your questions asked. Next week, and this hasn't been announced yet to all new participants, next week, Thursday, we will have a huge speaker, Nobel laureate William D. Phillips, who won the Nobel Prize in 1997 with Stephen Chu and Claude Cohen-Tanuji for laser cooling and trapping, an essential technique now applied for neutral atom quantum computing. Check the schedule, stay tuned for all great, interesting events coming on. Join us on Friday, join us on Sunday for the happy hour, and check out the schedule for next week, including Nobel laureate William D. Phillips on Thursday. In the meantime, we wish you an exciting time hacking, working on your solutions with your team. Stay tuned, join mentoring sessions, ask your questions on Discord, and we look forward to seeing your projects in 2 weeks. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.